Chapter 5. The Short-Tempered Fudge. Knot family, Mulciber family, Goyle family, Crab family, Parkinson family. Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge raised both hands and recited each family name with deliberate pauses, clearly enjoying himself. His secretary flitted around him, smoothing the creases in his pinstripe suit, straightening his bright red tie, dusting off his pointed boots, and fluffing the green velvet of his hat. Finally, she picked up his cloak, which had clearly seen countless hours of ironing. "Tell me," Fudge said, taking the cloak, his voice a mix of pride and challenge, "why do all these people insist on inviting me to their dinners?" "It's because you've done exceptionally well, sir," the secretary said, batting her eyes and twisting her modest charm. "Everyone is saying you're doing much better than any minister before you." "Exaggeration," Fudge muttered, draping the cloak over his shoulders and lifting his green hat to flick at some imaginary dust. "No matter how capable a minister is, you shouldn't let them say that. Pride can lead to failure. I must remain humble," he added solemnly. "You're humble enough already, minister," the secretary replied, adjusting the smooth folds of his cloak. Fudge stepped in front of the mirror, inspecting his reflection with satisfaction. "You'll get a raise this month," he said, holding out his right hand. The secretary hurriedly handed him her wand. "Keep it up. We'll make the wizarding world better." She nodded immediately, raising her right hand in a fist. "Yes, make the wizarding world better." Fudge nodded, pleased, and prepared to leave the office to attend that annoying dinner. But just as his hand touched the door, it was flung open with force. "Good heavens, don't you know how to knock?" Fudge slammed his nose against the doorframe. Ignoring his fallen hat, he bent over, holding his nose as he scolded. "Sorry, Fudge. I have something urgent to discuss with you," came a calm, deep voice, enough to make him forget the pain. Yes, these were two people Fudge had always cared about, and this was one of them. The absent one was Barty Crouch, who had once enjoyed far more support than Fudge. If it weren't for Crouch's adorable son, Fudge might have been defeated by him. The other, the one standing before him, was far more famous. Albus Dumbledore. Who didn't know him? Who didn't think he should be Minister of Magic? Merciful heavens, if Crouch could be managed, Dumbledore made Fudge look like nothing at all. Even after receiving this post in 1900, Fudge had often gone to Dumbledore to ask his opinion on decrees, a minister seeking guidance from a headmaster. What a joke! Yet it was Fudge's reality. If you didn't know Dumbledore's influence in the wizarding world, it was simple. Become Minister of Magic, and they would compare you to him. If it were Dumbledore, he wouldn't do this. If it were Dumbledore, he'd do it better. If Dumbledore wished, he could be minister at any moment. For a long time, this kind of talk surrounded him. Because of it, he had been forced to replace his secretary with one who, in both skill and looks, could not fully satisfy him. But she spoke so well, so persuasively, that Fudge felt he was the wisest minister of magic alive. And today, she had done it again, but all that good mood evaporated the moment Dumbledore appeared. Albus. Fudge picked up his hat, brushed off imaginary dust, and keeping his eyes firmly averted, spoke with his head down. "Rushing in like this, has Voldemort returned?" Dumbledore's eyes widened in surprise, as though witnessing the impossible. Yes, he had never seen Fudge so sharp. But that expression lasted only a moment, because Fudge's sarcastic tone said it all. "If I said yes, would you?" Merlin's beard. Fudge nearly stomped. Could anything be more ridiculous? "Albus, you admitted your mistake last year. He didn't return, did he?" "But this time it's real," Dumbledore said gravely. Fudge rolled his eyes, then noticed the office door was still open, with many small ears listening outside. "Close the door," Fudge said, then added, "You, leave as well." The secretary, just about to shut the door herself, quickly stepped outside and closed it from the outside. She knew her position. She never involved herself in political matters. "Fudge, you need to face all of this clearly. Calm yourself, maybe. Maybe we'll go back 10 years, Albus. I know how Jenkins and Mink were dismissed," Fudge said, suppressing his anger. Jenkins and Mink were the two ministers of magic before him. Jenkins had been removed for failing to control the pure-blood wizard uprisings, while Mink, though appearing strong, had been powerless to contain the rise of the Dark Lord. Neither outcome was what he wanted. "We have to confront this truth properly, Fudge. Malison did well, didn't she?" Dumbledore said. She just got lucky, Albus, Fudge said, turning around and sitting heavily in his leather chair. If it hadn't been for that person falling prey to Lily Potter's magic, she would have been dismissed too. That wasn't trickery. She put a love spell on Harry, I know, Albus. Anyway, she was lucky. But I don't believe in luck, Fudge snapped, waving his hand and cutting Dumbledore off. Dumbledore looked down at Fudge, feeling increasingly that this minister of magic was unreasonable. But so what? Fudge was the minister now. If you like, Albus, I can get you a drink, Fudge said, checking his pocket watch. But I have an important gathering soon, so we'll have to drink quickly. Hogwarts has many who can attest to my correctness, Fudge. You just need to. No, no, no. Fudge shook his head forcefully, interrupting Dumbledore for the fourth time. Don't say that again. You can't deceive me, Dumbledore. Just tell me, what do you really want? Dumbledore stared at Fudge, feeling he had already been clear enough. You think Hogwarts' office is too small, so you want to sit here and give orders? After a brief pause, Fudge finally spoke the truth on his mind. Dumbledore stood in shock, realizing that one of them had become completely unreasonable. To avoid matching him, he nodded slightly and then turned without hesitation, leaving the office. Bloody Ministry of Magic. Nicodemus was right, after all. Chapter 6. The Return Remains Uncertain. Whoosh! Voldemort, Neville, and Luna with her father suddenly appeared in a mist-shrouded valley. It's freezing here. Chapter 5. The Tempestuous Fudge. Lovegood shivered, his composure clearly shaken. Voldemort offered him a false smile before striding confidently deeper into the mist. Neville hurried to keep up, looking the most flustered of the group, while Luna remained surprisingly calm. Whoosh! A spell suddenly shot out from the dense fog. Voldemort didn't even reach for his wand. A mere flick of his hand diverted it effortlessly. The two children couldn't yet grasp the significance, but Lovegood's eyes widened in astonishment. Senior Carlotta, it's me, Voldemort, he called aloud, halting in his tracks. Carlotta Pinkstone? Lovegood asked in surprise. The witch he mentioned was one of those whose portrait appeared on chocolate frog cards. Yes. When I was in my first year, she was in her fifth. We often shared the same viewpoints, Voldemort explained, then looked at the children. Senior Carlotta may seem strange, but she is not cruel. There's no need to be afraid. Is it really, Tom? A trembling aged voice came from the mist, and the group saw a human-shaped swirl of fog approaching. Don't be afraid. Senior Carlotta never harms others unprovoked, Voldemort quickly reassured them, then turned to the mist. Shall I pull you out of the fog, Senior? Ha ha ha, it really is little Tom, the mist chuckled, coiling around him until its tip nearly touched his nose. How do you maintain your youth, little Tom? This method is worth a fortune. The fog swirled violently, and soon a white-haired witch leaning on a cane emerged. Stop calling me that name, Senior. You know I dislike it, Voldemort said with a smile. Besides, shouldn't we be more concerned with my resurrection than my appearance? I'm not surprised, Dark Lord, Carlotta replied, clearly preferring another form of address. We all knew you would return. It was just a matter of time. What matters more is what you plan to do and how you intend to do it. She reached out, touching Voldemort's face, even pinching his nose deliberately. Voldemort, visibly annoyed, pried her hand away, but Carlotta paid no attention, letting out a few mischievous chuckles. Neville and Luna remained unbothered, but Lovegood spun around in fright. Don't look, don't look. Seeing the Dark Lord embarrassed could only end badly. He was right. Voldemort had glanced at him during the pinch. I need your help, Senior Carlotta, Voldemort said, averting his gaze. Inside, then, she instructed, waving her hand. The fog stirred, forming a narrow corridor. Don't step into the mist. I have no idea what lurks within, Carlotta warned in her eerie, sing-song voice. There's an old-looking thestral, Luna said, stopping and reaching into the fog, her hand brushing against something as she spoke. Carlotta glanced at her curiously, then at Voldemort, as if to say, Where did you find this odd girl? You can see through the mist? Voldemort asked, ignoring Carlotta for the moment. No, I can only see the thestral. Other creatures in the fog remain invisible to me, Luna replied in her usual calm tone. Voldemort nodded thoughtfully. Keep your distance from the thestral. It brings ill omens, Carlotta said in her strange cadence, then turned and walked deeper into the fog. The group followed in sequence. Lovegood, still scared, asked Voldemort if Luna might be in danger. Everyone interprets magical creatures differently, Lovegood. I don't believe it will bring harm, Voldemort replied. Carlotta shot him a disapproving look, but he merely shrugged. When they emerged, a massive breadfruit tree stood before them. Carlotta's home was here, though inside the space was far larger than it appeared. The breadfruit tree gives me a sense of endless life, Dark Lord. You know how the ministry treated me. I despise lifeless worlds, she muttered, preparing drinks for them. Duke's red tea, Dark Lord? I remember you liked it before. Chocolate milk, Carlotta. My tastes have changed, Voldemort answered, then picked up a piece of paper from the table and with a flick of his wand wrote on it, Tivujang Pavilion. Victory and defeat are matters of soldiers beyond expectation. To endure shame and humiliation is the mark of a man. The sons of Jiangdong are talented. The tide may yet return, who can say? Swish! After finishing, Voldemort picked up the paper and handed it to Lovegood. This hieroglyphs? Lovegood asked, puzzled. Chinese characters, a poem. Next time you publish Singing Against the Chorus, place it after Carlotta's article, Voldemort explained. I never said I'd write for you, Dark Lord. I'm done with that, Carlotta said, holding her drink as she walked over. Why not? Voldemort asked curiously. Carlotta pursed her lips, refusing to answer. Was she good at writing before? Luna asked her father, curious. Miss Pinkstone. Lovegood smiled at Carlotta, lowering his voice. She was a remarkable activist. She opposed the International Confederation of Wizards Secrecy Act. Many oppose that law. I don't like it either. Luna shook her head. Not only that, she proactively informed Muggles about it, and for that she was sent to Azkaban multiple times, but she never regretted it. Lovegood spoke as quietly as he could, but the room was so still that everyone could hear. Friends of the Dark Lord going to Azkaban. Isn't that normal? Voldemort nearly spat out his chocolate milk, then shot Luna a sharp glare. If you talk, talk more. Smart people try to avoid legal consequences, child. That was just a tactic. I hope you never follow it, Carlotta said to Luna. It was clear she had a fondness for the peculiar girl, perhaps because she had once been one herself. What's this? Carlotta suddenly noticed the paper in Lovegood's hand. She took a look and then surprisingly read it aloud in Chinese. The tide may yet return. Dark Lord, I didn't know you had such grand ambitions. Voldemort smiled at her, somewhat surprised. I didn't know you knew Chinese either. The concept is quite profound as well, Dark Lord. We all thought you had lost your ambition. Carlotta smiled again, but this time her expression was genuinely warm, a stark contrast to before. I do not bow to fate, and it seems fate itself cannot compel me to do so, Voldemort said. He then gestured toward Lovegood. Allow me to introduce him. Lovegood, editor-in-chief of Contrarian Voices. Oh my, I didn't even recognize you, Carlotta exclaimed, her voice rising in surprise. What about the payment for the articles I wrote for you before? Lovegood's initial reaction was one of excitement, but the second reminder darkened his expression. We have long said there will be no payment, Miss Pinkstone, he replied, frowning. But the magazines you sold were for profit, Carlotta countered, waving her wand. The bookshelf to her right rotated, revealing a neat row of Contrarian Voices issues. Evidently, she was a devoted fan. I've never seen so many copies of Contrarian Voices in one place. Luna jumped up, running to the bookshelf, easing Lovegood's embarrassment. Voldemort ignored the minor distraction. His purpose was far weightier. I want you to write a column for this magazine, he said, levitating a copy with a flick of his wand and opening it. What kind of column? Carlotta asked. Welcoming the Dark Lord back? No, the announcement of my return will come later. Voldemort shook his head. I need you to analyze the structure of the wizarding world. The structure? Carlotta seemed puzzled. It's simple. Purebloods, half-bloods. That's it. No, not the old bloodline argument, sister, Voldemort dismissed her. I mean from a more complex angle, like the Muggles do. Political structures, geographic relations, historical continuity, magical development. Wait, Carlotta interrupted, frowning. I don't understand what you want to do, Dark Lord. Give me a theme. To reveal the true nature of this world to more people, Voldemort said with a shrug. What true nature? Be more specific. For example, the impact of bloodline ideology on politics, economics, and magical progress, and the contribution of traditional families to magical inheritance, and how to expand that further. and the Ministry of Magic's historical weakness in authority, which hinders the wizarding world's growth. Both Carlotta and Lovegood widened their eyes in astonishment. Even casual conversation with the Dark Lord had become so intellectually demanding. Lovegood felt overwhelmed, but Carlotta caught fragments of the deeper meaning, exactly why Voldemort sought her. Carlotta opposed the International Confederation of Wizards Secrecy Act, influenced by Grindelwald, but she was no blind radical. If she were, she would be another fanatic, not the renowned activist she had become. She argued with reason, not empty rhetoric. Her deep understanding of the Muggle world, a study of political science and sociology, made her rare in the wizarding world. Discussing bloodline ideology from political, economic, and magical perspectives could be insightful, Carlotta mused, but it touches on pureblood interests. Systemically, bloodline ideology hinders their development. So if it is the hindrance, Voldemort interrupted firmly. Lovegood's jaw dropped. By his understanding, the Dark Lord was supposed to support purebloods. Carlotta, however, frowned, deep in thought. Voldemort left her to consider, taking a sip of his drink. Hermione told me you advised her to attend university. A Muggle school, yes? Luna approached, curious. Yes, I didn't expect she'd tell you, Voldemort acknowledged. It was Crown's intentional approach, Luna stated plainly. He felt he needed to understand your perspective. Voldemort nodded, unsurprised. The Crown Horcrux was evidently clever, evident in his methods. So you mean under the guise of a public intellectual to thoroughly examine the pros and cons of bloodline ideology and perhaps confuse public perception? Carlotta finally emerged from her contemplation. You could say that, Voldemort replied, though it isn't entirely accurate. Voldemort shook his head, frowning. The more truth is debated, the clearer it becomes. The fundamental purpose of pureblood ideology is to preserve the wizarding bloodline, not for anything else. This is fundamentally different from Muggle theories of ancestry. Carlotta's eyes widened, her excitement evident. As long as that point holds, no matter how many flaws bloodline ideology has, it has a reason to exist. Exactly, Voldemort said with a nod and a smile. He had indeed found the right person, though he couldn't help sharing more of his thoughts. Though bloodline ideology is important in essence, it negatively impacts politics, economy, and the development of magic. That's why I think it should be limited. How? Carlotta asked. Let purebloods stay with purebloods. Let Muggleborns stay with Muggleborns, Voldemort replied without hesitation. He had thought about this for a long time. How to reconcile the relationship between pureblood and Muggleborn wizards was an inevitable issue he had to face. The conflicts were obvious. The former wanted to protect their established privileges. The latter sought to increase their own value. Clashes were inevitable. After much consideration, Voldemort concluded that the opposition between purebloods and Muggleborns should be separated from their interests. That way, interests remained interests, independent of identity. That's almost impossible, Carlotta exclaimed, hopping slightly. They are naturally opposed. No one will accept that idea. Acceptance isn't necessary, Voldemort said firmly. Have you studied how Muggles handle racial issues? Laws? Carlotta's eyes lit up. Yes, as long as legally, everyone is required to let purebloods stay with purebloods, let Muggleborns stay with Muggleborns. Half the problem is solved, Voldemort said emphatically. Arrogance and prejudice among white people had existed for generations. Changing it through cultivation, culture, or understanding was impossible. How did they solve increasingly severe racial problems? They turned to the law. What goes on in someone's mind is beyond my control, but their actions can be bound. As long as the conflicts aren't visible, the problem becomes manageable. Dig any deeper, and it's just compromise, the way of moderation. He sat there, lost in thought, turning it over in his mind. But the ministry can't solve this problem. We all know the limits of its authority. At that, Carlotta suddenly understood. Oh, no wonder you said the ministry's weakness hinders the wizarding world's progress. It's all connected, isn't it? Of course, the laws of nature aren't always absolute, but in specific contexts, one can make informed judgments. Voldemort nodded. When discussing purebloods, don't just speak at the reader. Interact with them. Don't lay out every problem outright. Let them think, guide them, and then address each point one by one. To influence the world in a way that's deep yet accessible, I think your approach is perfect, Carlotta said joyfully, raising her wand and spinning nimbly 3 times on the floor. Neville's eyes widened in astonishment. Wait, was that really how you used a wand? It's a fog wand, my own creation. Carlotta said happily to Neville, then turned her gaze back to Voldemort. That line, let purebloods remain purebloods, let muggles remain muggles, it's brilliant. It could perfectly bridge the gap between the two sides. But that requires a strong ministry, Voldemort replied with a smile. When you take power, the ministry will have that strength, Carlotta said without hesitation. Lovegood took a sip of his drink, silently hoping he hadn't heard anything at all. And the contribution of traditional families to magic? Carlotta asked as she sat down. I feel like you must have deeper intentions there. You know I was defeated by the ancient magic of the Potter family, right? Voldemort asked. We could only speculate before, but if you say so, I'll take your word for it. Carlotta allowed a rare touch of humor, showing she was in good spirits. If I had seen that spell even once, I would have noticed it. Voldemort's expression darkened, a shadow of memory crossing his face. You know I have this kind of talent. Yes, we all know, Carlotta said, gesturing for him to continue. So, encouraging traditional wizards to contribute more magical knowledge benefits a powerful wizard like me. Not only that, right? Carlotta wriggled excitedly. You must have even grander goals. Not grand in the usual sense, Carlotta. There are gifted children among Muggleborns too, like Hermione and that Lily who nearly killed me. Voldemort shrugged. My goodness! Carlotta screamed, astonished. You want to make your enemies stronger? Voldemort shook his head. No, senior sister, it's not like that. Carlotta stared at him, puzzled, and the others exchanged questioning looks. Everyone knew the Dark Lord despised Muggleborns, so could his thinking really be different now? If I were the Wizard King, Voldemort lifted his foot slightly in excitement, tapping it. Then, whether pureblood or Muggleborn, they would all be my children. For a moment, Carlotta and Lovegood held their breath. They stared, frozen, at Voldemort, at the faint smile on his confident face. They were stunned. Wizard King? Neville murmured, dazed, unable to fully grasp the meaning. But Luna's face mirrored Voldemort's faint smile. Her gaze held a flicker of light. If Bellatrix Lestrange or Vinda Rosier were here, they would have understood exactly what Luna's expression meant. Men like Grindelwald and Voldemort, powerful and ambitious, always held an irresistible allure. I retract any past disrespect, Dark Lord. Carlotta rose and gestured for Voldemort to stand, then took his left hand in hers. I once thought you were far behind Grindelwald. You know, in our time, we all revered him. But I must take back those words. I hope you can forgive me. She spoke softly, bowing slightly to kiss Voldemort's hand. I have never blamed you, senior sister Carlotta, Voldemort said gently. I will always remember your help when I was at school. It was my honor, Dark Lord. Carlotta lifted her head, her gaze filled with admiration. Lovegood swallowed nervously, debating whether he should do something similar. Not out of genuine desire to kneel, but because the moment demanded action. Fortunately, Voldemort soon calmed Carlotta's excitement, and their discussion resumed. From politics to systems, economics to philosophy, some points Lovegood understood, some he could not, but all were riveting. But that didn't matter. All he needed was for them to provide singing in opposition itself. Any echoes were a bonus. If they couldn't, they could just serve as laborers. Their discussion lasted late into the night. In the meantime, Neville had already dozed off 3 times, fitfully. Luna, however, though she didn't understand much, sat quietly beside Voldemort the entire time. I will tell all my old friends, Black Lord, Carlotta said after Voldemort indicated he was leaving. The version of you with grand ambitions has returned. You speaking well of me among old friends gives me greater confidence in the future, Senior Carlotta. Your praise outweighs 1,000 spells, Voldemort said sincerely. It's my honor, Black Lord, she replied. We all wish to achieve greatness. Yes, Senior Carlotta, but I have one more request. Don't put it that way, Black Lord. Whatever I can do, I will do without hesitation. Carlotta straightened her posture. She looked years younger. I want you to teach Luna. Voldemort's words immediately erased any remaining drowsiness from both Neville and Luna. You mean to pass on mist magic to her? Carlotta glanced at Luna and asked with a smile. Yes. Just outside the door, I suddenly realized it would be appropriate. Carlotta looked at Luna again, but before she could respond, Luna spoke. I will follow the Black Lord. Yes, not follow along, but follow. Her declaration wiped the last trace of sleep from Mr. Lovegood. You've gained another Bella, Black Lord. I hope this isn't too much pressure for you. Carlotta laughed, unfazed by Luna's response. I'm used to it, Senior. Talented people always face such challenges, Voldemort murmured close to her ear. Carlotta laughed and gave him a playful tap, then turned to Luna. I can teach by correspondence for the Black Lord's sake. Voldemort smiled and nodded. Thank you, Senior. We won't take up more of your time. He gave Luna a look, signaling her to wake the drooling boy who had been sleeping. He answered while gazing at the war memorial, like structure, which shifted to reveal 3 statues, a disheveled man with glasses, a beautiful and kind-looking woman with long hair, and a baby boy cradled in his mother's arms. Those are Harry's parents? The ones you killed? Luna suddenly stopped, staring at the figures. Yes. Voldemort also paused, studying the 3 in the statues carefully. His memory held almost no trace of James Potter. But Lily Potter, thanks to the intrusion into Harry's dreams a few days ago, was recognizable to him. What does killing feel like? Luna turned her head, her wide eyes flickering with curiosity. Nothing. Voldemort smiled faintly and shrugged in explanation. When you cast a spell and kill an enemy from a distance, the scene isn't very bloody, so there's really no feeling to it. And the backlash of black magic? Luna pressed. That takes some processing, but Luna, as long as you're not a particularly good person and don't kill often, it won't affect you much. Having said that, Voldemort stepped off the small plaza. Neville hurriedly waddled after him, and Luna took one last look at the statues before following. Why don't you teach me powerful magic? Am I not suited for it? Luna asked between breaths as she caught up. No, it's just that this branch suits you better, Voldemort replied. Why? The little girl trotted to keep up, her questions relentless, because of intuition. Voldemort stopped and looked at Luna. Your extraordinary intuition fits Miss Magic perfectly. It's a very peculiar branch. How peculiar? Luna asked. Voldemort sighed. He knew if he didn't answer all of her questions, she'd never stop, so he decided to pause and explain before moving on. It's a composite form of magic. Calling it mere magic understates it. It's more like a summoning ritual. Voldemort considered his words. To build a mist world, you create a mist wand, then expand its internal space, adding ghost-type magical creatures, either in order or at random. That's the general idea. The mist we saw there, can it all go into the mist wand? The little one's eyes gleamed with interest. Yes, most of the time you can't absorb the mist into the wand. It would interfere with raising ghostly magical creatures. He paused, then added, the mist needs nourishment. Nourishment? It's determined by the ghostly magical creatures within the mist. Voldemort began walking again. Usually some living creatures suffice, but in special cases, humans are required. Humans as nourishment? The girl's eyes widened in shock. Voldemort nodded calmly. There's nothing wrong with it. Isn't that cruel? She asked. There are many people in this world who deserve it, Luna. Think of it as punishment. Voldemort spoke without concern. At the same time, he had already sighted his goal. Luna wanted to ask more, but Voldemort waved her to wait. Where is this? Unable to resist, she changed the subject. The ancestral home of the Potter family, Voldemort said softly, as if afraid to disturb the spirits lingering there. What are you doing here? Luna asked, while Neville shivered beside her. This small wizard was actually scared of ghosts. Looking for an old friend, Voldemort replied, still in that gentle tone. Luna looked at him strangely. She had always found Voldemort to be the epitome of hypocrisy, the twisted smile, the seemingly gentle words, the formal politeness. But now he seemed genuinely invested in what he was seeking. What could it be? She wondered. I'm not going in. Just as Luna was about to step into the old house, Neville suddenly spoke up. Whatever. Luna didn't bother replying. She tossed the remark aside and sprinted after Voldemort up the stairs. Voldemort walked slowly, seemingly preoccupied with the dust, lifting his robes carefully as he ascended. Clomp, clomp, clomp. Luna couldn't care less about the dust, bounding upward without restraint. Easy, easy, Luna, Voldemort said, a little annoyed as the old wooden stairs kicked up clouds of dust. Use a summoning charm, Voldemort. It'll be faster, Luna urged, pushing him along. She found it amusing. No, Luna, that wouldn't be respectful to my old friend here, he replied, quickening his pace. He truly disliked the sensation of Luna nudging him forward. By the time they reached the upper floor, his robes were inevitably coated in dust, but Voldemort paid it no mind. He crouched near the bed and carefully reached underneath. His cautious movements made Luna imagine a child hiding under the bed, waiting for an adult to rescue them. But there was no child. Voldemort simply pulled out a wand, covered in dust. My old friend, he murmured, cradling it in both hands, feeling his heart soften. He sensed the wand itself seemed unusually happy. Is this your wand? Luna stepped closer and asked. Voldemort nodded and blew gently on it. Whoosh! Dust swirled, stinging Luna's eyes as she approached. Ouch! That hurts! She yelled in irritation, blaming Voldemort for not considering her feelings. Pure as spring water. Luna, eyes closed, heard him mutter the spell. Splash some on your eyes, Luna. It works wonders. She quickly cupped water from the spring and poured it over her eyes. Isn't it sweet? Voldemort's voice sounded again. What? Luna asked, confused. She hadn't even tasted the water. My wand spell conjured this water. Isn't it especially sweet? He clarified. If it weren't for the stinging in her eyes, Luna would have rolled them in exasperation. A wand? How could its water be sweet? Looks like you don't understand, Voldemort said. Luna slowly opened her eyes just in time to hear him continue. I find it exceptionally sweet. And at that moment, she saw Voldemort pointing the wand to his lips. He was really drinking it. Chapter 10. This is really me, London. Early morning. Don't you need any rest at all? In the presidential suite of the Hilton Hotel, Luna looked across at Voldemort on the opposite sofa. No, Voldemort replied without lifting his head. He was expertly polishing his newly recovered wand, his movements precise and deliberate. The morning sun rose behind him, casting a golden edge around his figure. His expression was serious, his focus absolute, and Luna found herself completely absorbed by the sight. Hey! Noticing her long silence, Voldemort finally looked up and called her. Ah! Startled, Luna's cheeks flushed, and she looked down. I am already engaged, Luna. Voldemort lowered his head again, speaking softly. I am indifferent when it comes to emotions, and for certain reasons I am very serious about marriage, so don't read too much into this. I wasn't thinking anything, Luna protested. Voldemort continued polishing his wand in silence, shrugging. His casual demeanor only made Luna angrier. She snorted in annoyance and turned away. But Voldemort remained focused on his wand, giving no sign of attempting to coax her. Aren't you even a little tired? After holding back for a while, Luna finally asked. Not at all. Voldemort straightened, stretching slightly, then held up the wand, turning to let the morning sun fall on it. From behind, Luna saw him nod slightly. It was clear he was very pleased with his fully restored wand. If you've been drifting in this world as a soul for over a decade, I imagine you'd want to stay alert every moment, Voldemort finally said, looking at her. But you've booked a large suite. What's the point of not resting? Luna asked, her eyes roaming over the luxurious room. She had never seen anything like it before. You're still young. You need rest. I'm waiting for the bank to open. He spoke without stopping his work, casting spell after spell. It was obvious he was enjoying using his wand. The bank? Isn't that in Diagon Alley? Luna asked, puzzled. A muggle bank, Luna. Honestly, I'm not fond of goblin banks. He glanced at the clock. It's time to go. You should rest a bit, too. I'll return later. I'm coming with you. Luna jumped off the sofa immediately. Aren't you tired? Voldemort asked. I want to make the most of my time, so I don't regret it if I drift as a soul for 10 years. The little girl bounced toward the door. Voldemort smiled and waved his wand, inscribing a line on the wall of Neville's room. London Bank, the nearest one. Exiting the suite, Voldemort spoke directly to the hotel's butler. Yes, sir. The butler replied while holding open the elevator. Through a walkie-talkie, he also arranged a car for Voldemort. The presidential suite came with its own private vehicle. By the time Voldemort and Luna, guided by the butler, reached the hotel entrance, the car was already waiting. Their magic is incredible, arranging everything so perfectly, Luna said in surprise as she climbed in. Money, infinite in power, Voldemort muttered in words Luna didn't understand, then got in himself. The driver steered smoothly, perhaps aided by a high-end vehicle, so the ride was completely comfortable. When they reached the bank, the driver was about to speak but stopped when Voldemort silently motioned him to remain quiet. Luna, half curled against Voldemort, had fallen asleep. Gently, Voldemort tried to move her, but she clung too tightly. After a moment, he simply carried her out of the car. 11-year-old Luna was still very small. "You are? I mean." Barely out of the car, Bogus approached, rubbing his hands nervously. "It's me, Bogus. This is really me," Voldemort said softly. "We'll talk later. The child is still asleep. Take me inside so I can collect my things." Bacchus immediately nodded and led the way, occasionally glancing back, revealing his curiosity. He was no longer a novice unaware of the wizarding world. He knew everything the Dark Lord had done, including his death. But now, he was alive again? Magic could really be this powerful? "Has the meeting notice been sent?" Voldemort asked quietly. "It's arranged, Voldemort? How should I address you, sir?" Bacchus asked with a grimace. In the Muggle world, calling him the Dark Lord would look absurd. Addressing Voldemort directly made him nervous. "Just call me Sir. No title needed," Voldemort said. "Understood, sir," Bacchus replied. "I've sent the notice to everyone, but a few of the Far East representatives think the timing is too tight." He noticed Voldemort's brow furrow as he spoke. "Of course, I didn't permit them to delay, but judging by their booked flights..." Result. Voldemort's voice had grown sharp and cold. "The latest expected arrival will be at 3 in the afternoon." Bacchus hurried to explain. "She is the regional head for China. The trip takes 10 hours, and that's already the fastest flight available." Intentional delay? Voldemort's displeasure grew. Bacchus seemed to beat around the point, but Voldemort sensed through legilimency that the man's loyalty was unquestionable, so he decided to give him another chance. "There are a few others still in that chaotic country, but they promised to hurry." "Noted." Voldemort cut him off. "Proceed with the meeting. We'll wait for them in the conference room." He then signaled Bacchus to handle the bank affairs. Soon, Bacchus had everything in order. Voldemort entered the vault room. Clack! The drawer opened, revealing his other wands and personal items. After placing them all carefully inside his robes and closing the vault, Voldemort turned and left. "Go buy some clothes," he instructed Bacchus. And just like that, the senior executive of the Riddle Foundation became a personal steward, attending to Voldemort's every need. Around 10 in the morning, Luna finally woke from her deep sleep. She had been utterly exhausted. "Try the clothes to see if they fit. You can't wear robes here." Voldemort tossed the remark to the just-awakened girl and then approached the 2 elderly assistants nearby. Dazed, Luna watched as they placed a device on Voldemort's head. "What are they doing?" she asked, confused. "Measuring head size, Miss Luna," Bacchus said warmly, appearing with a cup of chocolate milk. "Sir has selected a few outfits for you. Is this a convenient time to try them on?" Luna took the chocolate milk, still a little stunned, and nodded slowly. The young witch, barely awake, was about to start a life fit for a princess. Chapter 11. Greed and Ignorance. Even in the wizarding world, fairy tales about princesses existed. Luna had never imagined that one day she might find herself living like one of those stories. Many people bustled around her, presenting all manner of clothing. Some measured her height and arm span, claiming they needed it to craft a wand. Others meticulously measured her feet to custom-make shoes, showing her numerous styles. The usually dazed, innocent girl finally found her eyes lighting up at the sight of these sparkling things. "Time's about up. Let's go." It wasn't until Voldemort, in a sharp suit and leaning on an ivory-handled wand, approached her side that the young witch snapped out of this dreamlike world. "The Muggle world isn't so bad, is it, Voldemort?" Luna asked, fiddling with the gleaming bracelets on her arm inside the stretched limousine. "Of course, but the prerequisite is wealth," Voldemort said with a smile, though his gaze remained fixed on the financial report in his hands. It was a heavily simplified report, yet he still seemed to struggle with it. Of course, he could understand the long string of numbers at the end, but finance couldn't truly be understood that way. "Angela is waiting in the conference room, sir. If there are questions about finances, you can ask her," Bacchus said, noticing Voldemort's furrowed brow. "Oh, the little girl didn't come looking for me?" Voldemort asked, closing the report. Noticing Luna hadn't turned her head, his ears twitched slightly. Blame her for my late notice? I was only trying to avoid wasting your time, Bogus said with a smile. Voldemort nodded in approval of his judgment. How's her handling of finances? He asked. This is her work, sir. She's excellent, Bogus quickly replied. Voldemort nodded again, then fell silent. The car soon stopped at the Riddle Foundation building. Following Bogus, Voldemort ascended to the top floor office. You're Riddle? Angela asked in disbelief as he entered. Yes, Angela. There are many people here. We'll talk later if needed, Voldemort said, scanning the office. Most were elderly, but there were also a few new faces. You're the new head appointed by the Riddle family? A gray-templed gentleman suddenly questioned him. Voldemort paused but stopped him before Bogus could speak. Yes. Is there a problem? He asked. The meeting started at 9. Arriving at this hour? Is this wasting our time? The gentleman indicated his watch, displeased. Wasting our time is wasting the Riddle Foundation's time. Are you sure that's what you want? What's your name? Voldemort asked. James Douglas, currently the London Regional President, the gentleman replied. Voldemort looked to Bogus, who immediately nodded. Not an old man, then? Voldemort said, slightly puzzled, making no effort to avoid anyone present. Douglas is very capable, sir, Bogus whispered. Voldemort nodded again, then looked at Douglas. I apologize for my tardiness. I assure you it won't happen again. This caught everyone off guard. Douglas was momentarily stunned, but then accepted the apology. Bogus says you are very capable. Soon I'll assign a tricky task to you. Are you ready? Voldemort asked. May I know what it is? Douglas inquired. You'll know shortly, Voldemort said, glancing at the time. They won't arrive until after 4. Leaving this statement, he led Luna, Angela, and Bogus to the office that had remained empty for him. The group stayed a while in the office, decorated in an Eastern style. Angela asked many questions, and Voldemort inquired about the finances. It wasn't until everyone had arrived that they returned to the conference room. Mr. Douglas, please sit beside me. Douglas looked puzzled, but complied. You're so young. Are you sure you can manage the Foundation? A late-arriving Far East regional head questioned Voldemort before Douglas had even sat. Do you realize how much I make for the Foundation every minute, and what the Far East situation is now? You? Hold on. Let me understand it all, one step at a time. Voldemort cut him off with a cold expression, completely ignoring his anger, and turned his gaze to one of the female regional heads. You're in charge of the China market? Yes, the woman said nervously. How's it going? Voldemort asked again. The real estate expansion has been very successful, but other industries, she bit her lip. In other sectors, because I lacked knowledge of the Chinese market, I made premature judgments resulting in 2 losses. I am willing to accept all penalties from the Foundation. The conference room fell silent, everyone waiting for Voldemort's decision. He kept his head down, silent for a long moment. Some began to fidget impatiently before he finally spoke. Your intentions are good. Mistakes happen, but they can be corrected. From what I see in the financial reports, things aren't bad overall. You're profitable. Keep up the work. I have faith in you. He finished with a broad smile, making her eyes fill with tears as she nodded firmly. Humph. The person who had spoken earlier snorted disdainfully. Voldemort didn't even glance at him. Instead, he addressed the female head again. China has its own national conditions and customs. You must respect that. Can you do it? I guarantee it, she replied. Satisfied, Voldemort nodded, then looked at the man who had been grumbling. Have you embezzled funds? Voldemort asked bluntly. What are you talking about? The man demanded angrily, but Voldemort had already turned to Douglas. He has embezzled. Make sure this is handled properly, Voldemort said, then turned back to the man. How many times? I haven't done anything. You're slandering me. I will. Voldemort ignored him, lowering his head in silence for a moment before looking to Douglas. Roman and Liazovsky are his 2 main collaborators. Most of the embezzled funds are still under their names. See how much can be recovered and minimize the losses. The man froze on the spot. Douglas gave Voldemort a meaningful look. In his mind, this young man had already gained full control. This was merely the moment of judgment. Douglas thought it was unnecessary. Handling things quietly and subtly would have been better. Yet what he couldn't have known was that Voldemort had learned all this during his brief silence, only the economic losses. There was no fear. The two men just mentioned would willingly make restitution. If they didn't, he wouldn't guarantee Chelsea's future, but he could decide the fate of the two men themselves. Chaos, freedom, and money. Indeed, the perfect catalyst for corruption. Voldemort showed no mercy. Any case of embezzlement was dealt with decisively. Not only would the losses be recovered, but the offenders would also face legal punishment. One particularly hot-headed individual, perhaps emboldened by a supposed backer in Russia, thought he could resist, but Voldemort did not indulge him. With a flick of his wand, he cast a memory charm, emptying the man's mind before handing him over to the authorities. After all, while the Riddle Foundation might have moral flaws, it had no legal loopholes. Capital accumulation was always built on exploitation and plunder. Morality could never truly constrain it. Walking the edge of the law was enough. Crossing the line was unnecessary. At least the Riddle Foundation never evaded taxes. The internet must be developed, and we must control the core technologies. Once the traitors were dealt with, it was time to plan the Foundation's next steps. In addition to maintaining dominance over real estate and the arms industry, Voldemort decided to push into the internet sector. This field was already poised for rapid growth, and with his foresight, the expansion would be faster still. Beyond core technologies, auxiliary equipment and base stations must also be incentivized. Let more people participate. Profit was important, but there was no need to make enemies in every corner. The ideal strategy was binding interests, shared gains, and shared losses. Finally, Voldemort ordered increased investment in China, especially in real estate. Do not remove the funds allocated there. Reinvest everything. With that decision made, he dismissed the meeting. Cultivate truly capable people. Borgin, you are always someone I can trust, but there's no need to dig deeply into fields you don't excel in. Understood? At the evening banquet, Voldemort addressed Borgin this way. How much he grasped, Voldemort didn't know or care. The Muggle world was not his main stage. His focus remained on the wizarding realm. After the banquet, Voldemort took his two apprentices directly to Malfoy Manor. Welcome back, Dark Lord. The estate's courtyard was lit by enchantments, with a dozen or so wizards in black cloaks and masks standing at attention. Though few in number, they were all trustworthy. Voldemort greeted each with an embrace and exchanged brief words. Not, it feels good to have a body again. Crabbe, Vincent resembles you. He enjoys powerful spells. Parkinson, Pansy is brave. Train her well. After speaking with everyone, Voldemort attended the dinner organized by Lucius. Remove the masks, shed the heavy robes, light the lamps, and play some music. Voldemort began to show a different side of himself. He no longer enjoyed shadowy, secretive living. Invite the reliable family members as well. It should be livelier here, more spirited. Following his instructions, more people joined, wives and young children. Graduates and younger adults were not invited, following Voldemort's subtle guidance. Those around 20 were hot-headed and reckless. Giving them news of his return and their patronage would only invite trouble, which Voldemort most wanted to avoid. The wizarding world's conflicts, reformists versus conservatives, purebloods versus muggleborns, rich purebloods versus poor purebloods, were already spiraling out of control. At a time like this, discretion was crucial, especially since his resurrection was not yet complete. At the evening ball, Voldemort invited Luna for a deliberately awkward opening dance. Following his lead, Lucius and his wife laughed heartily, setting a festive tone. Afterwards, several ladies requested dances with Voldemort, all of which he politely declined. Stay with everyone else. I will check on Senior Aberforth. Midway through the ball, he told Lucius this. There was no surprise in Lucius's eyes. Instead, his words clarified the path forward. My father has long awaited this day. Please follow me. Lucius led Voldemort upstairs. Neville and Luna wanted to follow, but Voldemort refused. Take Neville for a dance, Luna. Cheer the boy up a bit. He entrusted Luna with that task. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock at the door, and from the sound, Voldemort could tell the wood was thick. Boom. No one spoke inside, but the door swung open with a heavy crash. My father has managed to suppress the backlash curse these past 2 days, but it has taken a severe toll on both his mind and body. I ask, Black Lord, that you take his condition into account and limit your interactions, Lucius said, unusually bold enough to make a request of Voldemort. I'm here to help, not add trouble, Lucius. I know what to do, Voldemort said, giving his shoulder a reassuring pat as he stepped alone into the room. The room was dark and damp. Crossing the threshold, it felt like entering a separate world. Is that the Black Lord? A raspy, weary voice called from within. I'm in here. Voldemort moved toward the sound and, upon entering, saw a heap of glittering objects piled in the corner. His gaze skimmed over them before settling on a neatly dressed Abraxas sitting behind his desk. He looked changed, handsome features slightly shifted, his nose subtly upturned. Look at me, a real mess. Abraxas gestured for Voldemort to sit across from him. Not the same Ab you remember. Voldemort gave a heartfelt smile. But your warmth is as it always was. It reminds me of the Hogwarts Express back then. Ha ha ha, that time you crushed old Crabbe. He complained to me for ages and even plotted some secret revenge. Abraxas laughed. They both sat down. Abraxas pointed to the cup before Voldemort. Chocolate milk. Not sure how you changed the taste, but here, it's however you like. Thank you, Ab, Voldemort said, lowering his head slightly before taking a long sip. Setting the cup down, he noticed Abraxas smiling even more. I feel like I'm seeing the old you, Tom. May I call you that? Abraxas asked. Of course, Ab. You've always been my guide in my heart, Voldemort replied sincerely. You can't say that, Abraxas said, waving his hand with a smile, but with earnestness in his eyes. I could never have guided someone as great as you, Tom. Look at Lucius. See what I've made of him. As he spoke, a trace of dissatisfaction appeared on Abraxas's face. Even more often than not, these expectations exceeded those we placed on ourselves. But Abu was different. He held no regrets for his child, only dissatisfaction. If I had been by your side back then, I would never have let you go to the Potters, Abu declared loudly. You trusted him so much, gave him power, gave him status, but look at what he did in return. Voldemort drank in silence. In truth, this was a thorn in his own mind, not because Lucius didn't stop him from going to the Potters, but because in that foreseeable future, Lucius had betrayed him. One act of betrayal, and it lasts a lifetime. The words sounded imposing, but ambition and interest could twist even the simplest things into complexity, and Lucius was no fool. He is clever, Abu, Voldemort murmured, setting down his cup. We cannot demand that our children mirror ourselves. Since I have seen no pure-blood wizard as flawless as you. You expect too much of him. No, Abu waved his hand decisively. Without you, Tom, he would have done very well. I can guarantee that. But I do not blame you. Voldemort nodded, indicating he bore no grudge. But your presence changes the wizarding world. I cannot promise it will be better, but it will not be worse. This is an opportunity, a chance for the wizarding world. Abu gestured like a lion, passionate and commanding, a true orator. Malfoy should fight for this, for the wizarding world. Yet he is too hesitant. What he has given you so far is insufficient. Voldemort raised an eyebrow but remained silent. I have lived quietly for many years, reading countless books, even Muggle ones. They taught me a truth. Speak it, Voldemort urged. You are not inevitable, but reform in the wizarding world is. Voldemort's eyes flickered with interest. He was clearly struck by the point. Before you there was Grindelwald. After you, will there not be others? Abu's voice deepened, his brow furrowed as he asked sincerely, why is the wizarding world in such constant flux? Why? Voldemort pressed. The system, Abu answered firmly. Our institutions are flawed. The International Statute of Secrecy, the Ministry of Magic, the pure-blood families, even our banks. Wizards step-by-step compromise, and in doing so, they accumulate deep contradictions. I agree, Voldemort said, his excitement rising, though his brow soon furrowed again. Yet I have not found the cause of this cycle of retreat. Why do we keep stepping back? Because of the ineptitude of the pure-blood families, Abu answered. Explain. Before the statute, when the British Ministry of Magic was first established, it was filled with pure-blood representatives. They sent special delegations, led by the Malfoys, to negotiate with William III and Mary II, hoping Muggle law would recognize and protect wizards. Abu lifted his cup and took a long, furious draught. They failed. Those useless ancestors. Voldemort sipped slowly from his own cup. If you, or Grindelwald, or even Dumbledore had been there, it would not have come to this. Abu slammed his cup onto the table, roaring. Damn it! We should have fought them! Even against a court with wizards, we might not have lost. Truth exists only within range, Voldemort murmured. Yes, exactly as you say, Abu replied. But at that time, none of the three of you were there. Why include Dumbledore with us? Voldemort asked, setting down his cup. He is a good man. No, he is not. Abu smiled, a playful glint in his eyes, just as he had on the train years ago. He did not dare enter the ministry because he hated muggles, and he hated the statute of secrecy. It cost him his family. If he gained power, who knows what he might have done? Voldemort habitually drew his reclaimed wand, twirling it in his hand. He realized that too often his thoughts were scattered. Perhaps it was the duality of his soul that made him observe from multiple angles without diving fully into one. This was not always a problem. Sometimes it was an advantage. But when it became a problem, it was a serious one. I need you, Senior Abu, Voldemort said sincerely. Without you, I might not succeed. Abu shook his head with a sigh. I am old, and soon I will die. Perhaps I can help you. Not only that, Tom, I no longer have the drive, Abraxas said, pointing to his legs. Haven't you noticed I haven't stood up all this time? They no longer obey me. Voldemort glanced at him in surprise, not expecting the problem to be this severe. Besides, the family has already passed to the Malfoys, and I've been retired too long. I may have bursts of ambition, but sustaining effort over time, my body and experience just can't keep up. A hint of regret showed on Abraxas's face. Clearly, he didn't want to give up, but his physical condition dictated everything. And Tom, talk properly with Lucius. There's more to uncover in him. I can't be too specific. Being part of the Malfoy family, I must respect the one in charge. Voldemort nodded. Though Abraxas claimed he couldn't say, his words already hinted at the truth. Lucius held secrets that could be extremely useful. I still want to see if I can help you, Ab. You know I'm skilled with curses, Voldemort said, smiling. Even now, Hogwarts maintains the tradition of appointing a new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor every year. Finally, Abraxas showed a spark of interest. What curse did you use back then? Voldemort asked. Dragon blood curse, and it was an adult dragon, Abraxas replied. Voldemort's eyes widened. No wonder there had been a pair of gleaming golden objects nearby. Why an adult dragon? He asked, puzzled. You knew their magic is powerful. If it backfired, it would be a huge problem. And usually a young dragon would have sufficed, Abraxas said with a bitter smile. If I could choose now, I'd follow your advice. But Tom, I was too arrogant back then. Voldemort paused, then nodded wryly. He felt a deep resonance with Abraxas's words. If he could turn back time, would he have sought out the Potters? Certainly not. Completely unnecessary. Even the battles he waged in the wizarding world now seemed foolish. But time never rewinds, and life is full of regrets. All we can do is move forward with steady steps, carrying the weight of our choices. Chapter 14. Dragonblood Curse. Legilimency, telekinesis, parseltongue, these were talents he had awakened very early. Curses, however, were different. He didn't even remember when that ability had first surfaced. In his memory, it had roughly begun after killing that rabbit. Even when he spoke harshly to other orphans, his words always came true. Yet at that time, he had no awareness of this particular talent within himself. It wasn't until long after arriving at Hogwarts that he truly understood it and began to cultivate it. And its application? Curses. Strange, powerful, but not particularly practical, chaotic and unstable. That was why Voldemort rarely relied on them. I need to make a potion that reveals curses, Voldemort mused. Do you remember which dragon we used back then? The Peruvian viper tooth, Abu answered without hesitation. I cursed him with dragonpox so he would vacate the position of Minister for Magic. Of course, now I have dragonpox myself. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the bluish scales covering his skin. The rashes on my toes are green and purple, worse than the rest. But my lower body is already beyond control, so I don't even feel discomfort, Abu shrugged. Voldemort nodded, recalling in Linzuo's memory that this senior of his had died from the very same disease. When you cursed him, which part of the dragon did you use? Voldemort asked. Fang and heart. You know the heartstring is the most powerful part of a dragon, Abu said proudly. Voldemort smiled and nodded. I see. I'll deal with this problem. Senior Abu, you know I need you. If I can recover my health, of course I'm willing to step forward and support you, Abu said sincerely. If I weren't worried about scaring people, I would go out right now. Voldemort smiled, nodded, chatted a little more with Abu, then departed in a hurry. Narcissus, African tree snake skin, crocodile heart, dried squeakbird feather.